Hi, welcome to New Zealand. Welcome to the live stream. I have been sitting here waiting for Fred Hubber to show up because he constantly gets upset when I have a live stream and he misses it. But apparently he's not going to make it today and will probably show up at the very end of the live stream. Okay, so I want you to get comfortable. We are going to talk about Session 0. I haven't really talked about Session 0 in any kind of video whatsoever. I will be putting the start time for this video down in the description once YouTube publishes the video, so don't worry about that. That will happen for those of you who are going to watch it later and need to disappear. If you want to watch the live stream later though, the thing with my live streams is I unlist them. So you have to be subscribed, hit the bell button and turn on your notifications to be able to get access to the live streams later on. That's just the only thing to remember. Okay, now for those of you who haven't been part of my live streams before, or almost forgot, patrons always get access to the live streams so they don't have to worry about that sort of stuff. Now, the sound and the picture seems to be working fine. You will see my face to begin with. We are going to be using slides. I'm going to use slides for the presentation. I'm going to be reading from my notes. And once I've finished my presentation, I will then bring it back to the webcam so you can see my face. Just makes it easier for me to present everything. And then we'll have a questions and answers, so an opportunity for feedback. If people want to give feedback, you'll get an opportunity to give feedback and how things have worked for you. I will of course be having a drink of water because I'm really sorry people, I have about 2 pages of notes and I have tried really hard to whittle things down, but I realized that like a lot of topics with regard to Dungeons and Dragons, not everything can be done in 2 or 3 minutes, and sometimes you actually have to spend a bit of time. So this is a really important topic, therefore it deserves plenty of time to talk about. I would say maybe 20 minutes before we're done, and then we're on to the Q&A. That's roughly what I think it'll be. So grab a drink, which is what I'm doing, grab some food, get comfortable, because we are going to definitely be talking about Dungeons and Dragons and Session 0. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Today's topic has nothing to do with Frankenstein for those of you who are currently confused by the image you can see. No, we are definitely talking about Session 0 for Dungeons and Dragons or for any kind of role-play game, but because most people who are watching my channel are playing Dungeons and Dragons, I'm really going to relate the discussion back to Dungeons and Dragons 5e rather than talk about other versions of Dungeons and Dragons or a different role-play game for those of you who are kind of curious as to how I was going to approach this. So what is Session 0? Session 0 is all about just setting up the game and the group before your Dungeons and Dragons game, before you even sit down and play the game. And yes, in some cases during your Session 0 near the end, there may be an opportunity to sit down and play for a short period of time, but the concept behind Session 0 is not so much about playing the game, but developing something else. And I'm going to spell it out as clear as I can. You don't have to agree with me, but I honestly think and believe that I have found that long-term Dungeons and Dragons campaigns are so much better with a Session 0. And it doesn't matter whether I am the Dungeon Master or I am a player. I've always found that to be the case. The key reason for any kind of Session 0 is developing a healthy relationship between the people, the players and the Dungeon Master. I know a lot of people get confused when I say this sort of thing. It has nothing really to do with creating a marvelous adventure or even sitting down and building characters. Certainly you will be doing that, but the exercise and process is about team building. For those of you who are confused by that, that is the focus. Session 0 prevents and helps avoid issues at the game table. This is why I do them. It's not because of any other reason really. It's really around making sure that the group is really healthy and working well and they understand each other, so you don't have to ask some sort of question from a complete stranger on the internet for advice on problems that occur at your table. And yes, I'm talking about every single YouTuber there is, including WebDM, which of course I know a lot of people watch, including myself. So what do you cover in a session 0? Well, the first thing I would say is you're going to start off with just setting the groundwork. And the groundwork usually starts with what sort of adventure or game does everybody want to play. That's not just the players, that's the Dungeon Master as well. You have a say in the process. And a lot of this discussion will involve a chat weeks ahead of time before session 0. It might be months ahead of time. I actually spent months before I ran my current campaign talking with my players, getting an idea of what they wanted out of the game before we even sat down and started having our session 0. That was my first key point. Then I would say go to Dungeon Master expectations. What does the Dungeon Master expect from the players and the process of running the game and playing the game? I tend to focus on things like fun. I want to have fun. I want everybody else to have fun. I want there to be teamwork taking place. And I'm really selfish. I want the players to make my life easier rather than create problems for me by any means they can think of. And there's a really broad aspect to that. My concern is always about the integrity of the group rather than other aspects. I don't really care about the rest. I just care about the integrity and how well and healthy the group functions. The next thing, you want to sit down and have a discussion with your players, and I tend to do this almost every single time. I will ask each player individually. You do not have to do it this way though. Player expectations are really good to discuss. So this could be their play style, what they like playing, and are they a slayer? Do they like to just get engaged in combat? Are they more an actor and like to just role play and play out the character? Are they more about puzzles? Are things like solving problems more their thing? There's usually a lot of different play styles. I've done a video on the topic. I'm not going to talk about it again. You're welcome to go and check that out if you want to. There's also the adventure focus. Are you going to focus on combat, social interactions, or exploration, or is there going to be a mixture of that? My current group decided they wanted everything. They wanted combat, they wanted social interactions, and they wanted exploration. So nothing was going to be put to the side. So that's fine with me. We'll live with that. The other thing with regard to player expectations that I find really important to make sure you establish, and that is talk to people and find out what they think is fun. Because some people's idea of fun is quite sick, and then other people's idea of fun is perfectly fine. So it's really good to establish those things before you have everybody sitting down at the table and suddenly you discover that people's way of playing the game is just not going to work. So have that discussion ahead of time. The location where people will play the game is decided. Now that could be online. I don't know, it could be any platform. You might be using Fantasy Grounds, Roll20. You might be playing your game at a game store. You might be playing your game at a cafeteria or a cafe, which is in fact what my group did. This is the picture I'm showing you right now. Or you might go over to somebody else's house and sit down in their lounge or in their basement and play the game. So decide on a location. You might have a couple of different options depending on how things work out during the week. Next, get people to commit to a consistent time and day. Make sure you try to pick a time and a day that generally will work for everybody. Now, there's no guarantee that everybody can show up all the time, but you need to have some sort of general consensus about what's going to work. Does the group meet weekly or fortnightly or monthly? Have that established. What can people fit into their busy life and their work life? How do you deal with absent players? If there's an absent player, does somebody else play that character? or does the Dungeon Master? Personally, as a Dungeon Master, I hate playing somebody's character. I won't do it. No, it's not going to happen. If the player who has a character says, I would like so-and-so Bob or Jill to play my character, and I'm quite happy for whatever outcome occurs, then I'm all good with that. So those discussions need to be made. When does the game get cancelled? And I generally don't like the idea of cancelling a game just because one person is missing. I usually have a couple of backups. If I don't have backups, I have a large enough group that it doesn't matter if we lose a couple of players. If we have less than 3 players and we wind up with 2 players, I cancel my game. You don't have to do it that way, but that's how I operate. So establish those things ahead of time. Really important to determine how character death is managed at your game table. Now, if there's no way that the group can figure out how to bring their character back, they haven't got spells, they don't have the resources to do that, how is it going to take place? Are they going to have to roll up and make a new character, or will the Dungeon Master use the huge arsenal of options available to them to bring the character back into the game? People already know how I view character death. I don't really worry too much about it. I will use lots of different options. I'm happy to do that. So that's a discussion that I will have with my players with regard to character death. So make sure you talk about that. And I know a lot of people think, well, we shouldn't need to worry about those sorts of things. We don't need to worry about them, but you do. Do talk about character death. It's one of the biggest problems that we have to talk about on the internet with regard to groups who have somebody's character die. What is the character leveling method? Are you going to be using milestones where you simply have the characters advance at a certain story point or when they complete a particular goal or achieve something? Or are you going to be using experience points where the Dungeon Master will have to assign experience points to goals, quests, social interactions, puzzles, combat, and then tally it up? Are you going to use the average across the group? Are you going to give out experience points individually? Or are you going to use something else completely different that I haven't discussed? So have a discussion about that so that people know, because they will definitely ask you. Are you going to be using retraining options for your player characters, if any? I use retraining. I allow my players to retrain outside of the game. Before the game or after the game, I don't have a problem with that. I have already done a video on how retraining works for me. You're welcome to go and check that out. If you don't want to have retraining, then don't discuss it or make it clear that you're not going to allow adjustments. But I always feel that when players get locked into something, it's often, 1, it's boredom, which is dangerous, or 2, it's a mistake and they didn't realize they made a mistake and it's too late and they get worried that they can't make adjustments. So therefore, eliminate that problem by just allowing retraining. What are the players' magic item expectations? Really important to discuss. Now, Dungeons & Dragons 5e doesn't really have a lot of magic items. Magic items are rare in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Other versions of the game, it's different. When we were playing Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, there were so many, they were dripping off us. Dungeons & Dragons 4e, even more magic items. In fact, the whole system was built around making sure you had magic items in certain slots. So make sure you understand what your players expect, and then if their expectations aren't what you plan to do, make sure you tell them exactly where you're at with regard to that. What's the availability of magic item shops? Are there going to be any in your world? Dungeons & Dragons 5e doesn't tend to have them, but maybe you are doing things differently. I tend to use magic item shops sparingly. I usually don't present them until much later on in my game, usually beyond level 5, and most of the stuff they can buy in my game worlds are usually consumable. They're not permanent magic items. There isn't a market for that in my world, but you might be doing it slightly different. You need to have a discussion with your players about magic item crafting and creation, because there's bound to be somebody who wants to make magic items. I've already done this, so I don't really allow magic item crafting in my game anymore, because I did it to death, and so I don't use that. But I've already done videos on magic item crafting. You're welcome to go and check those out as well. You have to decide what your system is going to be and make sure your players understand whether that's going to be an option for them or not. So there's quite a lot to discuss with regard to magic items if you hadn't figured out. Okay, this is number 10 on my list. That's the personal group rules. What are the rules in terms of your conduct, your code of behavior at the table, in the game, your etiquette, your table etiquette? What are the taboos? What are the things we are not going to include in the game or we expect not to occur? These are in fact the most important aspect. It's the most important aspect of session 0. All the rest, if I had to pick only one thing that I did during my session 0, that's the thing I would keep. And I know you're probably thinking, well, Fred, if that's the most important thing, why is that not the first thing you said? Well, actually, I did. I did say that. I just didn't say it in that manner. I said it in a slightly different manner. I talked about group health and relationships, and that's really important in your game. So make sure you do it. Number 11, the system of roleplay game. What roleplay game system are you using? What version of Dungeons & Dragons will you be using? I'm going to be using Dungeons & Dragons version 5, so that's what we're playing. So have that discussion. I know a lot of people think, well, that's a no-brainer, that should be pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised. If you've already had these discussions outside of session 0, then you won't need to say them again. But if it needs to be made clear, then make sure you do so, because some people make adjustments to game systems, and so you do actually have to make have a discussion about it. Okay, 12 would be combat presentation. Are you going to be using battle maps and miniatures, or are you going to be using theatre of the mind, where you just use your imagination? Or, like myself, I tend to use a combination of both the battle map and miniatures and theatre of the mind, dependent on my mood and the situation and the complexity of the combat. That's how I approach things. So you need to decide that, let them know. What's the campaign length in real time? Are you going to be running this campaign for 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years, 10 years? Everybody has a busy life. They need to have an idea of how long this campaign will run. What about levels? In terms of the campaign, are you going from level 1 to 20, or level 1 to 10, or are you starting at level 3 and going to finish at level 8? Have that discussion. What is the starting level for your characters? Really obvious stuff, right? Are you starting at level 1, or are you deciding these characters have been around a while, we're going to start at level 3 or level 5? I don't generally talk too much about alignment, but what about the alignment of characters? What alignments can you have? I tend to say in my own games, you can have any alignment, and alignment is not a prescription, it is a description of the character. I want to make that clear for those of you who are wondering how I see that. I've done alignment videos as well, but honestly, I don't allow evil characters. So can they play a good character or an evil character? And if somebody is putting down on their character sheet a particular alignment, I'm going to look at you, chaotic neutral, and think they can do just about anything they like. Then you'll need to adjust their alignment, and then you might have to have a discussion with them that this is not the character that I really want to have involved in my campaign, and will the other players accept that? You know, characters don't have to stay in a campaign if people want to play a particular type of character. And there's certainly a tradition in playing the murder hobo, so you need to decide those things in advance. What about your attributes? How will you determine the attributes? Is it going to be standard array where you get a set of numbers and you assign them to your strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma? Or are you going to be using the point buy system, or are you going to roll them up? And there are different ways of rolling them up. It's already spelled out in the player's handbook, but other people might, dungeon masters don't necessarily use the roll 4 6-sided dice, drop the lowest. Some people will use the roll 3 dice, and that's what you're going to get. So you got to kind of spell that out to your players so they know what they're getting into. I tend to use the point buy system because it keeps pretty much everybody on the same level. I don't want them sort of having too much disparity. It's hard enough to deal with that as it is. What about hit points? How do you determine your hit points? Is it going to be the class average, or will you be using dice rolling? I generally avoid dice rolling, but you can have your preference to that. I tend to go with the average because I feel like that means that I have a pretty good idea of about how I can scale my encounters over time. Whereas if I have somebody who rolls consistently very low, like 1s and 2s, and therefore has a very, very low pool of hit points, I can't really set up the game for them and somebody else who's doing really well because they keep rolling pretty much an 8 on their 8-sided dice every time they roll their hit points. So that's why I don't use it, but you don't have to do it that way. Have a discussion about your starting wealth and gear. What method will you use? Are you just going to assign them some money based on their class? It's already in the player's handbook. Or are you going to use a package? Or is there going to be additional stuff included? A lot of dungeon masters like to add a few extras just in case, just to make their campaign feel a bit different. I know I have included silvered weapons, particularly if the campaign was using a lot of werewolves or creatures that needed to have silvered weapons, and I knew that they would need them straight off the bat, and you just don't have enough money when you start off to be able to do that. Or I would make sure I would include extra healing potions or healers kits or additional gear, or I might just decide, like, no, it's all right, let's just go straight for the plate mail, because I don't want you to have to constantly be trying to save up money or using the entire group's pool of resources to finally get that shiny plate mail so you can stand in the front line and reduce the chance of getting hit and knocked down, particularly for tanks, right? Okay, so we talked about a lot of stuff. We are getting closer. Number 18 would be have the players build their characters together. It's really important that they do so together, not before the session. It's all right for the players to have a concept, but I really discourage players from trying to start drawing it up in advance, because they have not had a discussion with everybody else. And you can't really decide on something until you've sat down and found out what the parameters are of the game. If the Dungeon Master says, well, no, you can't play that race, I'm not going to be allowing the Tabaxi, and I'm not going to be allowing the Artificer in my game, so there's no point in having built that character in advance. So you've just wasted a lot of time. So I know a lot of players don't like this. The type of people who need to be able to sit down and they want to hash it out and they want to crunch numbers and look at all of their options, that's not when you do that. The best time is when you're all together, so you make a character that works in the group rather than as a lone wolf. The discussion about the lone wolf has been discussed so many times in so many videos and so many public forums and community forums that I can't count it. So build the characters together. Players creating a common group background or goal. Now, Acquisitions Incorporated is a good example. They're all part of the same organization, so they all have the same goal. And it doesn't have to be Acquisitions Incorporated, we are a corporation who are going and trying to make money. That's not necessarily how it has to be. In previous campaigns, my group have decided we were all part of the same sort of knights. So I believe it was, for the life of me, that's Knights of the Unicorn. That's right. We were all Knights of the Unicorn. We all worked for the same organization, so we had a common background and goal. That doesn't mean that you can't have different backgrounds for your characters. Your players can still have an individual player character background, but they also need to have a common group goal and background to make things a bit smoother. So I would say number 21, roughly. I would say, is it number 21? No, 22. No, 20. Number 20. Players link their characters to each other. Some sort of link between the other characters. Now, it doesn't have to be every single character in the group. It might be just one other character. It might be two. I tend to prefer 2 links. So if somebody has a character, that they have a relationship of some kind with 2 other characters at the table. But that is really determined on how many people you have at your table. If you only have 1 or 2 people, it's going to be pretty hard to do something like that. But character links are very important. Let's look at things like players determining each other's role. Now, this is actually really important too. You can still have a party completely composed of paladins, but one paladin might be set up more to be the tank, another one might be more to deal with healing, somebody else might be more set up and multi-class to deal with the skill monkey side of things, and somebody else might be a mixture of paladin and sorcerer to cover the mage or the magic user side of things. So the roles are there for a reason. They've been there from the very get-go. I'm still of the belief that players should play the character they want, but you still have to understand that players in a group are simply a different cog in a machine. And if you don't build the machine correctly, it's going to be a bit more difficult. That means that the Dungeon Master needs to make adjustments, or the players need to change the way they play their game to be successful and have hopefully not too many failures as they're working their way through their campaign. Number 22 would be players integrating their characters into the game world. So the Dungeon Master tells the players what the world is like and gives them some meat and potatoes to start with, and the players build a character that will work in that world. So if you're playing in a medieval fantasy world, you don't have somebody trying to build a steampunk character or a fantasy sci-fi character that doesn't work in the world. That's all part and parcel. Currently, my own group, I gave them some background on Phandalin and Salt Marsh, and they actually decided they would all be from Salt Marsh, and they were going to travel to Phandalin, and I'm running currently Dragon of Icespire Peak, but I will be continuing on with Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which I had made completely clear to my players so they knew sort of what they were dealing with. So there's another thing to discuss. Make sure your players are doing that. Complete the character sheets. Now, sometimes it's not possible to sit down and for a player to complete everything. I have a couple of people at the table who sort of struggle with that, other people who can pump it out in 30 minutes, other people who can do it in 2 minutes. It really depends on people and how they sort of approach character building. Some people need to spend all week, but the idea is that the character is built and complete when we come to playing the game. Options. Let's talk about different options. What optional roles, variant roles, house roles will you be using? So are you going to be using feats? Are you going to exclude any feats? Is there going to be multi-classing? Is there going to be flanking? These are often conversations that take place. Feats, multi-classing and flanking, probably the most common things to come up, but often a Dungeon Master will have their own house rules. They need to discuss those with the players so they know what they're dealing with. I tend to, with my own group, make it clear that my variant rules and house rules are optional. So you can either use my variant rule or you can use the standard rule that already exists in the core Dungeons & Dragons 5e game. So therefore, I don't need to concern myself too much with people getting upset with my house rules or variant rules, because they are there as an option to utilize if they want, and if they don't like them, they don't need to use them. But you still need to discuss that sort of stuff. Recently, in my own campaign in Session 0, we discussed what source books and materials can be used to build the character. So for me, I decided that the Player's Handbook and Xanathar's Guide to Everything was it. We did exclude, I believe in my own group, the Elven Accuracy feat, just because it is very broken and easily exploited. And we also excluded the Grappler feat from the Player's Handbook because personally and I think everybody else at the table agreed that it was a piece of garbage. And I wanted people to be able to grapple without having to have a feat. And even though I had a discussion with them about feats and multi-classing, they still wanted to keep feats and multi-classing in the game because they've been playing the game a long time and they prefer those sorts of things. And that's fine, it's all right. So have a discussion with your group about what resources. Often the topic of unearthed arcana comes up, so make sure you have a discussion with your players about that, because there's often the desire, particularly when new unearthed arcana comes out, it's usually overpowered because that's done deliberately by the design team, and therefore if they do it deliberately, it's testing the waters. It's trying to figure out if people will be able to enjoy this and what they need to pull back on. Rather than adding things, they take things away. So they usually give you the whole pizza rather than just one piece of the pizza. Now that we were talking about pizza, we should go on to talking about things like, how is the group food going to be arranged? Is everybody going to bring their own food? Is there going to be a joint food arrangement? Are you going to be playing in a cafe like my own group did many years ago, and they just go and buy their own stuff, or they buy stuff for the group when they feel like it? Figure out your food stuff, because often there's going to be food at your game. Unless, of course, you're playing online, then it's going to be all individual. You might want to add something to session 0. You might want to change things. You might want to take things away. You don't have to discuss everything. Like I said, honestly, there's only one thing out of all of this that really needs to be discussed in session 0, and that is the group relationship, your etiquette, your code of conduct, your taboos, those sorts of things. I think they are the most important aspect of session 0, but you can add other things to your session 0 if you feel you need to. Now, I'm hoping you found this useful. If you did, fantastic. I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters covering pretty much every aspect of the game. You're welcome to go and check those out. I have a series on the Lost Mine of Phandelver and Dragon of Icespire Peak, and there's also a Curse of Strahd series as well if you are interested. I also did a whole bunch of videos on being a lazy dungeon master and just generally dungeon mastering in general. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing stuff like this, I have a Patreon page. I have affiliate links to Amazon and the book depository if you buy stuff online that supports the channel. I have a merchandise shelf underneath my video, and I run ads on my video. So if you don't run an ad blocker, I'd actually get something out of that, which is quite nice. Thank you very much. Otherwise, make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. All right, my face is back, and we'll have a discussion. And I'm looking at the timer, and I went way, like 30 minutes. So how many pages did I have? Yeah, there's 4 pages. I must have elaborated too much. Too much elaboration. Okay, I'm going to go to the chat, and let's have a look through here. We're going to burn our way through here really quickly. And I'm going to say hi to people as I go, real fast. Hi, Kevin, how's it going? Hi, Matt. Jankovic, how's it going? Kanoko, hi, how are you? Scott's here, how's it going? Adam, hi, Adam. What is the time in New Zealand right now? It's, 11 a.m. on the east coast of Australia. Well, Australia is a continent, and you have a lot of time zones. It's currently 1:35 p.m. in New Zealand. We have one time zone because we are a very small country. And Alan is here. Hi, Alan, from the Dungeon Coach. For those of you who don't know anything about the Dungeon Coach, Alan runs a YouTube channel over on YouTube, obviously, a YouTube channel on YouTube, and discussing, really, I think the thing about Alan's content, for those of you who are unaware of the Dungeon Coach, is he covers a lot of homebrew stuff. things that people don't necessarily know too much about. He presents his own homebrew ways of doing things. And I think it's a good place because I'm always about trying something new and trying to do things that aren't necessarily the tradition, and trying something that might give you a better result or a different result. Because not everything you do is going to be better, it might be just different. Hi, Elliot. Yes, absolutely. Some of the players will bring a lawyer to session 0, and it's not really a lot of fun. I try to figure out how to use rules lawyers to my advantage and exploit them. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, how can you do that? Well, there are ways. If you give them the player's handbook and say, okay, when I need a rule looked up, you're going to look it up in the book for me and then hand me the book so I don't have to do that. That way it frees up your hands to do other things like drinking some water, and not just drinking some water, eating some food, looking at your notes. And when they say, oh, but I know it off by heart, you say, no, that's your job. You're the rules lawyer, right? You're going to look it up for me, find me the page, turn it to the book. And if I actually need to look at rules in the middle of a game and I feel inclined to do that, which often I couldn't be bothered doing, and I don't usually do because I usually know the rules pretty well, that's how I deal with that. Easiest way to deal with a rules lawyer. Dear. Hi, Tommy. My group is postponed till the pandemic era is controlled or ended. Okay, Tommy, I really want to have a quick talk to you about that strategy, Tommy. Just to make it clear, this thing is going to go on for a long time. Okay, you've got to understand that the problem is not going to go away by having a lockdown for a month or 2 months. Okay, the only time it's going to be solved is when there is a vaccine and everybody has access to the vaccine freely, and everybody has been vaccinated. Okay, like the common flu, like influenza. That's a year or 2 down the track. So Tommy, I really encourage you to go and use Discord or Skype and just play Theatre of the Mind and play online. There are so many different ways you can do that. You can even, if everybody's on Facebook Messenger and got it set up correctly, then you should be able to just video chat on Facebook Messenger. It's actually not that hard to do. I do it with my family. We play together. We don't play together. We talk to each other because we can't go and visit each other. And I have a big family. Okay, sometimes there's like 6 or 8 people in there. And of course it's dependent on your internet connection. But if you do have a decent internet connection and you do have a camera, or most laptops have a camera built into the laptop, your phone, if you've got a smartphone, it's got a camera on it. You can literally run your game off your phone if you wanted to. So don't wait until after this, mate, because it's going to go on for so long. By the time we come out the other end, the world will look so different. Hi Dee, how's it going? My group is postponed until the cleric recovers from, oh dear. All right, well, fair enough. That makes an awful lot of sense. Dee, how many people do you have in your group? Because if you have enough people to continue playing, I would encourage you to continue playing. Why? Because it's good for the mental health of everybody else who's stuck at home. And as soon as your cleric has recovered, then you're away and everybody's back at in the group and playing. But get together, okay? Because honestly, there isn't too many things that people can sort of grab too much joy from right now because of all the hassles they're going through. So play online. Cheese Molio. I caught my first D&D live stream. Yes, you did. And I butchered your name terribly. I do apologize. I'm just going to call you Cheese. Conan. I don't know about Conan. I don't know what does that mean, Matt? You have to explain to me a bit more. You're talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, pumping iron. I thought that was a good representation of retraining. I couldn't think of anything else. I was going to go with Rocky and Sly, but I decided in the end I couldn't get a decent picture, so I would leave that alone. Okay, Matt, what do you got here? Between the time when the oceans drank Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Ares, there was an age undreamed of. Yes, there was, exactly. Who doesn't like Conan? I always liked Conan. It's a shame that we haven't really seen a decent number of Conan movies. There should have been more of them. And I would have liked to have seen Arnold in a lot more of them too, but they never did it. Hi, Dancers. Now, for those of you who don't know Dancers is responsible for sending me the photos and the video for the Lost Mine of Phandelver Cragmore hideout video. Now, if you are a player, you should never be watching that video if you're playing in it. But if you're a dungeon master, you might get a kick out of it because it's pretty impressive. Yeah, Will, I do miss Will. I think he was great for the game of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not over yet because there's lots of people who are bringing the game in, and I'm sure, well, I mean, the thing is, Will Wetton plays many games, and I'm sure he still plays Dungeons and Dragons. He just doesn't do it publicly. What do you got here, Scott? Fred, you should make a sheet with a checklist of all of the things to establish at a session 0 for patron people. Just an idea. Scott, as many of you had pointed out to me quite a while ago, I should be making sure that I provide a document for my patrons on all of my video content that I do. So yes, there is. There will be. It already has been created in Google Docs, and I will turn it into a PDF, and it will be made available to patrons so they can go and check it out. For those of you who are not a patron, you'll just have to make some notes. But honestly, I don't think I have said, I haven't really said anything that anybody else hasn't said. I think I've pretty much gone over the same stuff that has always been talked about. I am becoming Jeff. Hi, Jeff. How's it going? I'm glad you like the channel, by the way. If you like it and love it, that's good news. I'm doing something right. No, I don't know what you mean, Matt. Just an average guy. All right. Canal Skylab. Yeah, I'm trying to build an image in my mind of a canal and a Skylab, and I'm struggling to come up with something. Hello, how are you? Do you believe there is just 4 people in all my town who play D&D? Well, there might well only be just 4 people, but since you probably can't go and visit them and play Dungeons and Dragons, do it online. I'm sure there's people in your time zone who will play with you. And you know, look, I know it's really scary to bring in new people into a group, but you don't have to keep them if they don't work. If they come in and it doesn't work, then say, sorry, we don't want you to come back. You're just not going to work for our group. My advice to you, one of the best ways to get new players into playing in your group is to approach somebody who's never played the game before. Frankly, I have fewer problems with people who have never played Dungeons and Dragons ever compared to somebody who has played Dungeons and Dragons and you just don't know what you're getting because of all the bad habits and the things that they have attached themselves to. But people who have never played the game before are like a blank slate. You can train them as a dungeon master. That's the great thing about them. What's that, D? I need to see a live play with Kevin Smith at the table. There are live plays of Kevin playing the game. I believe Relics and Rarities is on Geek and Sundry, I believe it's called. Geek and Sundry is a YouTube channel. Relics and Rarities, and Kevin Smith was playing with one of my favourite dungeon masters, Deborah Ann Woll. You might remember her from The Punisher and Daredevil, the TV series. She's probably one of the best dungeon masters I've ever seen. And I like Matt Mercer, and I like Chris Perkins, They are fantastic dungeon masters, but what Deborah does is something different again, and it feels so much like Dungeons and Dragons and less like a performance, and I still find it very entertaining. So go try out Relics and Rarities. It'll be in there somewhere. I'm sure you'll find it. Okay, what else we got here? Canal, can you do a written version of this, or this live is going to stay here on YouTube? Okay, so Canal, what happens with my live streams is it will be unlisted. There is going to be a written version only for the patrons. I do an edited version of all of my live streams, okay? So Canal, you do not need to worry about leaving here and not being able to go back through and make notes. So essentially, that comes out a few days later, sometimes 2 or 3 days later, and it will not include the Q&A. It will just be, I present everything, the slideshow, and then it ends. That's why my live streams look a little bit like an edited video to some people when I do the edited version. They just don't realize that it wasn't actually an edited video. It was me doing it live. I just chopped the front and the back off, and that's it. So I don't spend hours and hours with the editor. Okay, that will come out, Canal, so you do not need to worry about it. You'll still be able to get access to that. That will be public, but the live streams go unlisted. How's it going, Steve? How are you? Tommy's got to go. See you later. Overboard DM is here, so Joe's here. Cujo. Now, Overboard DM has a channel as well. He does miniatures and terrain. A lot of it is high end. He does reviews on a lot of different products. I know he's done some product reviews for different monster cards and so forth. Go and check out his stuff because nobody else is doing what he's doing. And I find it quite interesting. Honest Joe, I don't always watch right to the very end of the video, but I usually do watch some of it. Okay. Okay, what else we got here? Overboard DM, what do you got here? I will let people use evil characters. See, the last, some advice to you, which I think you should consider. Never allow evil players to your table. Okay? Because evil player equates to evil person. I think you'll find that the world will work much better for you if you play with good people and good players. And there's a difference between an evil player and an evil person. And there's certainly a difference between that and an evil character. Having evil characters at the table is a different thing completely. Players, no. Characters, possibly. Okay. D. I have 5 in my group currently besides myself. DM. Well, there are only 5 in my group too. But considering that we will probably be playing on Skype or Discord for the next year or two and not be able to go and meet up in person, we're all going to have to get used to it. So absolutely. I don't stop the game just because somebody's missing. If we have 3 people, we go. So that means we can lose one person. But now that we're online, it does actually mean it can open it up. I can include people who would not have been able to travel to where we played physically, who can play with us if I wanted to. And I've got plenty of people who can jump into that if the group, because it won't be my decision, it will be all the players as well, the people I play with. Are they all right with this person playing in the game, or is it not going to work? Just things to discuss. Now, I know a lot of people have been watching videos on how to play online. I would just like to remind you that Zoom is a high quality product in terms of video and audio. It has very little lag, and it has absolutely garbage security. If you haven't been paying attention to the news, one of the reasons why I will not use Zoom is it's bad enough having my own government and other governments using software and spying devices to check on everybody, looking for keywords that you say and stuff, and they can pick all of this up. That's bad enough, but I do not want my stuff being made available to anybody through Zoom. And that's why I never talk about Zoom and why I won't use it. If you want to use Discord, you want to use Facebook, you want to use Skype or some other video chat service, awesome, but I don't like the idea of using Zoom. What else we got here? Almost to the end. Thank God for that. I can go then. I can go and make some food for myself. I'm getting hungry. Jankovic. Today I ran Death House. Oh gosh, I already killed a player character. Yeah, that happens. But it's not the end of the world. You know, I've talked about character death before. I can't. How many videos do I have on the total party kill? I think there's about 3 videos on the total party kill, or TPK. I've got at least 3 videos on character death and options. As a dungeon master, character death for a player character is not the worst thing you can do at the table. Okay, in terms of a consequence. If you are thinking you need to have consequences, trust me, there are other ways of doing that. And if you're playing Curse of Strahd, oh my, there are many opportunities to mess with your players and their characters. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about a death. I would honestly just let them continue playing and just to build in a consequence to their character, which hopefully they will find interesting as time progresses. Yeah, relics and rarities is where you want to go, D. Okay, that's retracted. Okay, okay, I got it. I'm almost there. Yes, evil characters. Evil characters are a maybe. Evil players and people are a definite no. Thank you for your advice. You can call me Skylab. It is better. Okay, Skylab. I think that is actually that Skylab needs to be the next video. Now I will explain myself. I don't know what I will do. I am going to probably do some videos on building a character for some of the players. Sort of just building a first level character of a particular class. So really basic stuff. But my home group would like to have a home base. And I think I should do a video on having a home base. Because I've done this a few times. And it would be entertaining. And I think it would be useful because it's something you can pull and integrate into your campaign. Doesn't matter if it's a homebrew or pre-made. It's fun to have a home base for your players' characters that they can, you know, let's go back to the Batcave or Castle Greyskull is waiting for us or something else. Flying castles are a big favourite for players, so I would expect to see a home base video coming up pretty shortly. I think that's definitely very likely. What do you got here, D? My group is just about to wrap Lost Mine of Phandelver. I am planning on starting Ghosts of Salt Marsh next. Is there a better choice, in your opinion, for a second adventure? Okay, so I did a video on the next adventure after the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Okay, I don't think there's anything wrong with Salt Marsh. Ghosts of Salt Marsh is basically a collection of adventures that you can put together or not put together. But that video, which is the next adventure after the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which you will find in the series Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master Guide, you'll find it there. And it will discuss a whole lot of options for you that I have figured out. And in some cases, considered trying, but honestly, I feel like Lost Mine of Phandelver is supposed to be for beginners, and what you need is the same sort of format and preparation time as you were getting from the Lost Mine of Phandelver. So I will talk about adventures that are not necessarily Wizards of the Coast. I will tend to drive you towards Kobold Press and a couple of other products. But that's the video to go and check out. And I think I talk about the Book of Lairs, Prepared, which is a Kobold Press product, really good product. Even Prepared 2's excellent. And there's a couple of others. Tales from the Yawning Portal, not a bad idea. The Forge of Fury would have been my top pick to transition from completing the Lost Mine of Phandelver if I was to do it. That would have been my top pick. So I've given you a couple of ideas. I haven't just said go and see my video. I've given you a couple of ideas. But watch the video. There's a lot of detail. Yeah, a mansion ship that flies around as a home base would be cool. Ships are nice and mobile. Yep, absolutely. Hi Garrett, how are you doing? Cherry pick encounter Icespire after Lost Mine of Phandelver, highly recommended. Yeah, cherry picking some of the encounters from Icespire Peak would actually make a lot of sense. I wouldn't use them all of them. Certainly the one you want to pick would be the Icespire Hold with Cryovane. I think that's a definite must. But you can sort of mix it up because a lot of those encounters don't necessarily have to be combat and they can all be role play. Therefore, there's no concern about what level the character is going to be. If the encounter you're running is not combat based, you can run it at any level. And frankly, for those of you who haven't played at higher levels of the game, I find that higher levels of Dungeons & Dragons 5e work much better when you focus less on combat, which will annoy the players because all of their leveling up is based around combat, and you focus more on exploration and social interaction and the niceties and negotiation, where they can't just smash in the door. The Rise of Tiamat is a lot like that. It's very much a negotiation adventure. And I find that that works much better at higher levels. But I don't think that was the question. I got distracted. Okay, I think that's covered everything. This is the topic for Session 0, and I know people have been asking me to do it for a long time. So I finally got it off my backside and did it. Okay. All right. So wherever you are in the world, look after yourself and your family and your friends, and stay away from your neighbours, but just make sure they seem all right from a distance. Until next time, keep rolling those 20s.